welcome to a very unusual cover story. We're going to start the year by raising an issue that is very important but not really highlighted. The plight of transgenders. How does society view them? How does a person accept their own identity and go against the norms? And who decides what is normal? These are some of the issues we're going to be picking up in the show today. Joining me is Rehan Monkey. She is a trans feminist. She's a writer and a content creator. And in fact, I would suggest all of you follow her Instagram post at Brian Monkey because it's really been educational for me also. And Neeti Shukla, she's a social activist, she's a dancer, theater personality, but she's also been the national director and jury at the Miss Universe Trans Pageant Show of 2022. And she's done a lot of work with trans models, transgenders, and she's raised issues that are very important. So, first of all, a very happy new year to both of you. And Ryan, if you could just, help us, educate our viewers about your story. What made you decide to, be so vocal to come? I don't even know what is the right word. Accept and embrace your identity. Perhaps help me out here.
For sure. Firstly, thank you so much, Priya ma'am, for having me here. And Neeti, I'm so honored that we are all. Neeti ma'am is here, and I look at them as I'm very humble that I am actually sitting and
I'm also
for having me here. So I think like my journey really difficult to like sum it up. So let me give it to you. Basically, I was born and brought up in Dubai. I'm from a family in Bombay. We are a Muslim family, quite conservative. And being born and brought up in Dubai, there's almost zero representation, right? Like even in Bombay, at least you're aware because there's transgender food. Okay, yeah, sure, sorry. Yeah, so again, my story kind of starts with the fact that I was born and brought up in Dubai. So I was born and raised to a Muslim conservative family from Bombay. And being born and brought up in Dubai, one of the unfortunate things was a complete lack of representation. Because even in India, because of how the queer community or the Hijra community or just the LGBTQI community has always been inherently part of the culture, even if it has been shunned on and off, it has always been visible. Which of course comes with its own challenges because there's a lot more stigma attached in India, but there is representation. Like in Bombay, you would see them on the signal. For me growing up, I had zero. So there was none, right? And I don't know, somewhere when I was maybe even my pre-teens was one of the first times I realized that I have some genderqueer feelings, that I didn't completely feel like I was a boy or I am a boy at that time, but I didn't have any words, to articulate it to myself. I didn't have a language to understand it. So even to make sense of it in my own mind. And then this got to a point where I think in my pre-teens, or around 11 or 12, I was reading a magazine article. It was in Dubai. It was a Friday magazine or some magazine. It was about 6 Iranian trans women who had transitioned medically. And in Dubai, none of this is allowed. You don't see it anywhere. But in Iran, since 1976, they've had it legal because of their own context and stuff. And that article really spoke to me and really like hit me as a child because I'm like, wait, there's a procedure. I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't have the words. But even at that age, at that young age,
what age was that?
About 11 or 12, right? And even back then at 11 and 12, living in Dubai, not having seen that much of the community, I still had internalized transphobia. The internalized hate that society sets in, which will come through religion, might come through conservative societies, might come through colonization, might come through even education, and of course, definitely Bollywood and representation. And so even at that age, I was still internalizing this. So for me, it was very challenging. And what happened was at that time, I kind of repressed this memory. And I decided that I didn't want to address it. I told myself, Rayan, by the time you're 21, you'll get married, you'll have children. After you're 22, you'll have children. And by the time you're 30, you'll be a father, you'll forget about all. So then for 15 years, ma'am, I didn't think about this, right? 15 years passed by and it just went. Like I just started getting on with my life. In the meanwhile, I started developing other issues that happen when you try and suppress something so important to you. Like I started having depression, I started dealing with anxiety, I started even having an alcohol addiction, which I still manage and deal with. So I even have substance abuse and now I study about addiction and I talk about addiction and it really helps me. I talk about it in therapy, I talk about it to other people. But that's where I started from because quite often an addiction is a means of coping with a depression, right? The substance user is actually depressed. the addiction is a symptom of something else sometimes. So that was the case with me. And I went through life and I came to lockdown 2020. And along the way, what happened is I got a lot of good representation, right? Like a lot of work, like what people like Neeti ma'am were doing. I'd already moved to Bombay by that time. I was coming across things that others were doing. I was taking part in Lakme Fashion Week, other fashion events. I was in events where they were, just having representation. I was not having friends. I was not really personally getting involved, but I was able to see it, right? And I moved here in 2013, so almost like to 2020, from 2013 to 20, because in Dubai there was no representation, right? It was legal, it is being made, but in India there was still good representation. In the meanwhile, the Trans Act had happened, the Section 377 was abolished, all of this was also happening. And what helped me was good representation. So in 2020, when this documentary came out, Disclosure, and it was really talking about how trans folk are portrayed in mainstream media, that really helped me. And in that, this memory came back, which I told you about while watching the documentary. So I paused the documentary, it was a lockdown, I was alone at home. I started crying, and that memory came back. And then it began my own journey with some really close friends, eventually with therapy. It took me one more year before I was able to come out to my family, come out on social media. But what I realized was what helped me here was good representation. In the meanwhile, for the last 10 years, the work I've been doing is content for brands, content for online magazines, media magazines, etc. So I'm good at writing, I'm good at shooting, I'm good at creating reels, I'm good at telling stories. So I knew that good representation helped me. But along this entire place, up until now, one thing I did not find was any Muslim queer representation, right? It's very lacking. It's almost not there. It's very hard to find it. And then last year, my therapist introduced me to the Queer Muslim Project, which is actually based out of India, and they do some really interesting work, and that really helped me. So when I came out, my objective was to try and be the representation that I didn't have, to try and just show more representation because it's needed, because there's a lack of it. Do more of diversity and inclusion work, and because it's things that come because of my past work, it comes easy to me to create content, to do these things. It's it's my privileges, and how I can use it to just try and make it easier and be good Muslim queer representation. Just to try and show people there are so many ways to be queer, so many ways of being Muslim. That's how it is. So that's what I do now. Yeah.
How did your parents react when you came out, and or they always knew that that you were going through your trauma, that you kept it to yourself? So that must have been a surprise, or how did they react?
so so that's actually, like, I would say that if I were to try and answer that one, right, I would need an hour. Like someday I want to make an hour long video of coming out to my folks and how difficult it was. And the thing I want to just say here is, very importantly, is after I came out and it's been a year and it's been a journey, I've started to realize how complex it is. And the thing is, if it took me 30 years, okay, I'm now 31. If it took me 30 years, me is the subject, the trans individual in this conversation. If it took me 30 years to be able to come out to myself and accept myself because of how society is set up, because of how culture is set up, because of how much hate we are given and shown, can you imagine how much longer it's going to take my family? Like it is. So when I came out to them, it was hard. I'd done a whole lot of research, a lot of YouTube videos, and I was expecting them to not accept because I knew the dynamics of my family, how our culture is set up, how it is set up. So going in, I knew that they wouldn't be able to accept it, but I also understood it because it took me so long to accept it. It's a struggle. When I say I understand it, doesn't mean that I think it's okay. But I can, on a human level, I can understand the position they're in, and I don't come at it from a place of judgment or hate. I have pain, yes. I wish that they were completely alongside, but I feel they are making their attempts and they're trying to come along to it. And that, but when I came out to them, it was hard for them, especially for some members of your family, because it's almost like a grieving period for some of them sometimes, but it shouldn't be so. I think if we have a lot more awareness from a really young age, a lot more representation, families won't react this way. Parents won't be so sad. And I think that's more important to move towards, because that's what it showed me through this. It's not a fight against your parents. It's actually just understanding how all of us have been indoctrinated almost. into believing things in a certain way, that the world is only binary, there's only one, there's only male and female.
You refer to yourself in what pronouns? She and they. I was reading up, right?
I use she, her, they.
Niti, if you could just unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've been doing a lot of work in creating the kind of awareness that Rayan is also looking for. Understanding and awareness is hand by hand. Goes hand. So some of the issues that you have encountered in your work.
Yeah, yeah, Priya. First of all, I would like to give thanks. You inviting me for such a discussion of sensitive and as well as beautiful topic, and I would like to say people has to be sensitized. Our society is not a sensitized. We are three genders: male, female, and trans. Not we are male and female. I am working with the kinners. You do understand those who go for Toli Padai? Do you understand, Kinners? And second is sex workers, right? And third are beggars, right? And some of them, those who are under this position, those are studying and they are confused कि मैम हम कहाँ हैं, कहाँ खड़े हो? No one is ready to accept us. So I found after being 1.5 years, I'm being with these people, these beautiful peoples. They are really so emotional with me, and they are attached to with me in Delhi only. I'm working in Delhi only after retirement of my husband. I settled in Delhi since last 1 year. So only I am with these people. Once I was invited, one of the Siddhi Production House conducted a fashion show about these transgenders. So one of the NGO invited me as a jury. When I saw their talent, I was shocked. He such a talented people, and they are under.
What is the kind
not
of stigmas that you feel that needs to be overcome, and the stereotyping that is being done about them?
Yeah, these are we people are transphobia, right? कि we don't want to see them because they are not हमारे साथ जबरदस्ती करते हैं, हमसे मांगने आते हैं, हमसे ये करते हैं, वो करते हैं, इस तरह सा एक टेंडेंसी हमारे माइंडसेट बनी है, लेकिन they couldn't get the reason why they are these people. क्यों ऐसी पोजीशन आई है इंडिया में, इस सोसाइटी में ये पोजीशन हमने क्यों लाई है? इसके रीजन वी आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर दिस पोजीशन. हम खुद हैं इसके, क्योंकि सोसाइटी ने इनको एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया है, पेरेंट्स ने एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया है, स्कूल ने एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया. इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्कूल का इतना वीक है कि वी आर नॉट सेंसिटाइज देम. एंड हम स्कूल में जब बच्चे ये जाते हैं, उनको टीज किया जाता है, दिस इज द छक्का, छिजड़ा, और ये हमारे साथ नहीं बैठेगा. उनके साथ एक टॉर्चर है, इमोशनल टॉर्चर है कि टीचर्स को लगता है कि ये एक जर्नलिस्ट की एक प्रॉब्लम है. उनको एक सेंसिटाइज की है, उनको जरूरत नहीं लगता है कि हाँ हमें इनको बताना है कि ये इट्स वन ऑफ द स्टेज है आपकी. जैसे लाइक एक वुमेन है, फीमेल है, जब अपनी एक एडोसेंट एज में आती है, एक तो ये भी प्रॉब्लम आती है. उसी तरह से ये इनके अंदर ही अंदर एक प्रॉब्लम है, उसको हम फेस करना है. तो इट्स अ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द society, parents, teachers to educate them. बच्चों को समझाया जाए, टीचर्स को समझाया जाए, और हमारी सोसाइटी को समझाया जाए कि एक्सेप्ट देम. कि स्कूल दे ड्रॉप आउट द स्कूल बिकॉज ऑफ द बुलिंग देम. क्यों क्यों दे व्हाई डू दे ड्रॉप आउट द स्कूल्स? इफ दे विल नॉट एजुकेट, how will they get a job? Where they will join? They will work as a sex worker, and they will join as a kinder, Toli Badai. And what the results? HIV. And this is, they are HIV carriers and they are spreading HIV. So I am working on this field only कि मुझे इनको अंदर से ही एक सोसाइटी को एक स्कूल के थ्रू इनको मुझे एक सेंसिटाइज कराना है, जिससे कि हम ये दे शुड नॉट ड्रॉप आउट द स्कूल और अपनी एजुकेशन कंप्लीट करें, और स्कूल में इनको गवर्नमेंट इनको एक सीट से एक अपना एक आइडेंटिटी दे कि दे आर इन अवर पार्ट ऑफ अवर सोसाइटी. लाइक जो उनका आधार कार्ड हमें चेंज कराना पड़ता है, हमें पैन कार्ड चेंज कराना पड़ता है, वोटर आईडी के लिए, एवरीथिंग वी आर रनिंग अराउंड फॉर हियर एंड देयर फॉर देम. एक वन ऑफ द our my trans sister Jan Kaushik, she terminated from the school just because of she opened her identity, she is a transgender, because
स्कूल से
students
निकाल
were
दिया
not
उनको.
sensitized. Yeah, because students were not sensitized. The teachers were not sensitized. Students were not sensitized कि ये transgender है, इसको they terminated from the school. Like
उसको
ये
निकाल दिया.
position, right? They terminated her. Just she reveal her identity transgender है. कि ये तो है ही ना आपके कि transgender है या हिजड़ा है या किन्नर है या इसको हमें घर में नहीं आने देना है, घुसने नहीं देना है, और मैं इनके साथ ही हूँ. आई एम among all these are my friends. ये they are emotionally attached with them. कि ये मैम, नीति मैम इज मोरल सपोर्ट हमारे लिए है. हम इंडिया में हमारे लिए हमारे साथ है नीति मैडम.
And Ryan, it's interesting जो नीति ने कहा, what she spoke about the career options. She said that literally, either they end up as beggars or singing at shadis, or just sex workers, because of the barriers that they face. Which is why having someone as you being a spokesperson, creating an awareness is also important, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is part of the stigma, which
Stereotyping.
respect to the fact of what Neeti ma'am said is completely true. It is also part of the stigma that's continuing to be propagated, that this is a system that's continuing. While what's really interesting is, in the time that I have been out, I've been doing a lot of. So one of the things I studied is diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I did like an online course at one university, and that's something that I do with workplaces, where I come in and we do sessions and we do awareness. And what I've realized as feedback, and also from the community, is actually we are being able to get into position. So a number of organizations, even from the government onwards itself, we have elected transgender politicians and officials, all the way to BMC and municipality level, to a lot of state level, and then going into the private sector. We have a lot of trans representation happening even in the corporate sector today. I'm forgetting the name of a banking firm, but one of the firms that I can completely talk about is Tata. Tata has a number of transgender individuals in their corporate office, and they're doing a lot of work. So, while it is true that when we look at the sheer numbers, the majority on the street are having very few choices of the kind of work they do. We have to really focus on the conversation that there are a lot of lives that are being lived that are other than that. Because otherwise, what happens is, for transgender individuals itself, it creates a cycle, where we don't imagine we can occupy these spaces, because we understand that we are only supposed to occupy very few spaces. And this becomes a self-propagating cycle. But the reality is, even though I have a lot of issues with the movie Chandigarh Kare Ashiki, the fact that that movie could come out and the life it portrayed, the Zumba instructor life of a transgender individual, this is also reality. Yes, it is a minority, but if we can highlight that, if we can tell more stories about how so many transgender individuals are not necessarily choosing to do sex work, might choose other options, and no judgment to sex work, because it's completely legal. Yes, there are issues and there needs to be education and awareness, but no judgment. But there are a lot more transgender individuals, not a lot more, but there are those that are choosing others and are able to live those realities. And if we can talk about that, I think it just allows a lot more trans people and even the society to look at us a little differently.
You spoke about diversity at workplace and going and talking to corporates and all that. So what are the issues that you touch and raise upon?
So there's like a kind of theoretical framework that I have been taught with, but then we've been also taught to adapt it too. So what I do is, because I studied this from a university in the US, I study a lot of the data when it comes down to Indian numbers, right? So something surprising is, actually India has one of the largest queer reporting populations in the world. As in, not everyone is saying we are gay or lesbian. They're saying we're not necessarily straight. Almost something like an 18%, right? It's really high for India. But at the same time, we have one of the highest number of people who are not out, right? Only like less than 8% of the population said that we know someone who's queer. most people who are actually queer won't be out there. Like anyone who's belonging to LGBTQI, for the majority are doing it hidden. They don't really identify, they don't come out in public. And this creates a big vacuum in the workspace because one of the driving factors is workspace. And here's one big issue that we come up with all the time. And this actually ties in with the street begging and the sex worker choice, right? Is there was about survey, but a large number of queer people have reported that they have left their place of work because they were bullied at workplace. Some joke or someone making some kind of innuendo or making some Bollywood reference, something, or straight up bullying or straight up sexual harassment. And so many have phases that they leave it and imagine that again that we can never work in these kind of jobs. We can never hold the job of a journalist. We can't be doing an advertising job because these are things that end up happening. And then there's a problem with the Trans Act where the the punishment served as the Trans Act for sexual abuse or abuse of trans person act actually less than that of a cisgender woman or a cisgender man. So that ends up propagating these kind of things. And that's the reason why a lot of people do not come out at the workplace, right? But there's a really, because of the amount of time we spend at a workplace, there's a really good time to your mental health and the ability to be out and comfortable at your workplace, right? Because if we spend at minimum 8 hours, some of us spend 12 hours working. If you're spending that many hours working and you're not happy, how would your mental health be good? I mean, the majority of the time you're not happy. And this is one of the things that is one of the challenges we face is how can we create sensitivity and create a space for that workplace where people can come out. That is the objective. But it should be a choice, right? Like they should not feel like I have to come out because the sensitivity workshop happened, but they should be able to come out and feel comfortable there. That's always the goal of it. And it always becomes different challenges for different workplaces depending on age and exposure to kinds of like what even ma'am said about education and what you learned in school or what you learned beyond school.
Neeti, there's some of the issues that people come and report to you during the workplace. Like for instance, in your fashion Miss Universe thing, you're saying some people are banned from say sari rounds. Or do you have that kind of discrimination?
Yeah. We just New Year only Miss Naz Joshi, Miss Universe Diversity. She only faced it in my bar cafe. She went in a CP. The transgenders are not allowed. She come back at home. Such kind of discrimination is happening in these people. And best part now these girls, those who don't want to join किन्नर ये समुदाय कम्युनिटी मुझसे कहती हैं कि नीति मैम मुझे प्लीज यहाँ से निकालो मुझे कहीं मॉडलिंग लाइन में लेके जाओ या कहीं भी मुझे एक शूट दिला दो मूवी दिखा दो आर्टिस्ट बना दो कहीं ना कहीं समथिंग दे वांट टू कम आउट फ्रॉम दिस फील्ड. They are facing lots
Are there
of
any brands that are using transgenders in the advertising? Rayan, you would know.
Yeah, actually, quite a lot of brands are using. So, I mean, I don't want to name some brands, but I can name some individuals who have worked with some really big brands, right? So, there's Glorious Luna, there's Durga, there's Trinetra, Dr. Trinetra, of course. These are three people, and all three are genderqueer, and they've worked with some really big brands and designers. Actually, I think brands always have this kind of opportunity or responsibility because they occupy public space and communication so much that they end up influencing thought and on issues like that. So yeah, in India there's a lot of brands, designers that are ready and working with genderqueer trans folks.
Neeti, आप कुछ बोल रहे थे? I interrupted you. The issue of the issues that you'd help people deal with, उसके बारे में थोड़ा और.
Pardon?
The issues that trans queer people face और जो आप जिसमें मदद करती हैं, जैसे कि आपने कहा in a restaurant they were not allowed.
Yes. Some issues like they don't have Aadhaar card, PAN card, and voter IDs. So on this field, we are helping them. Aadhaar card, PAN card, gas connection, everything we are arranging फॉर देम। सेकेंडली उनको इस अपलिफ्ट कराना है, इस लाइन में लेके आना है कहीं ना कहीं, लाइक फॉर एजुकेशन लाइन में जो दे वांट टू कम, और मॉडल लाइन में, इन सच ए वे आई एम हेल्पिंग देम। एंड थिएटर में जस्ट मैंने हमने प्रोजेक्ट नीलो और आई, मेरे थिएटर डायरेक्टर हैं इधर श्रीराम थिएटर के, तो उनके साथ मैंने प्रोजेक्ट हम लोग तैयार कर रहे हैं कि ट्रांसजेंडर्स को लेके हम एक प्ले तैयार करेंगे, थिएटर तैयार करेंगे, ऑल ट्रांसजेंडर्स विल बी देयर, society will get know about them. And my trying level was to give them respect and dignity. My first requirement to give respect, like they are trans women, like I'm a woman, I also want respect, similarly they also want respect. कि आप इनको हिजड़ा और ये छक्का कह के क्यों बुला रहे हो, right? So they will give you reply, so that why do they start to hate them? ये उनसे नफरत की जा रही है कि ये गलत चीज है, गलत लोग हैं, ऐसा ये मन में, ये तो गॉड गिफ्टेड है, whatever they are God gifted, और द नारेश्वरी है जो एक इनके अंदर एक पावर आई है, मेल है फीमेल दोनों ही इनके अंदर है। तो व्हाट यू एक्सपेक्ट देम, एक पब्लिक को जगह ट्रांसफोबिया आ गया है, उसको एक दूर करना है। और whenever they invite me as a organizer for the events, मेरी फर्स्ट रिक्वायरमेंट ये होती है कि will you give entry to my transgenders? अगर they refuse कि we can't, I don't allow to go there, मैं जाती मना कर देती हूँ। Oh, sorry.
Yeah, out of time, just one last question to Ryan. Ryan, Neeti mentioned some of the words that are used that are hurtful. So what are the questions that you find really inane or you resent, which may be asked from the goodness of one's heart, but, you said this would be asked, why are you asking this only to a trans queer person and not to, the...
No, it was really interesting. So, could you repeat some of the words?
Yeah.
Could
Neeti repeat? Yeah, she said people are called hijda and...
yeah, chakka, kinnar, hijda, chakka.
So let's say kinnar and hijra, because I really love studying about this. It's really interesting. So let's take hijra and kinnar, right? Both are actually words that a community used to use to identify with honor. Actually, the word hijra comes from pilgrimage. Okay, it comes from a derivative pilgrim, because at one point of time in this same geographical region, people who identified as hijra community were seen as pilgrims because they went from one to another. And therefore, they were, because even in the Hindu religion context, the reason that they are considered spiritual is because they don't see the world as only one or two. They see the world as everything. Not even, some will see it
complete whole,
and some will see it just, it's not, it's everything. It's just one or it's all, right? So in that regard, you don't see, you see them as people who did not live just as one. They were able to traverse that. And that's why people of the Hijra community and Kinnar community, both words actually held a lot of respect and power when the British came here. And because they saw this, that's why there was even, we have this very interesting piece of legislation which is no longer existing, is the criminalization of tribes, right? There were some tribes that were criminalized. These tribes, they're all criminals. It was so for transgender folks also that in the colonial time, transgender folks are criminals. The reason being because they have a lot of respect, right? And that's so interesting that today those same words become hurtful. They can become hurtful because of stigma attached. So it really, it becomes challenging because for someone like me, I actually am very, in some terms, a lot of my a representation that I've taken, a lot of the education I've come, sensitivity comes from a Western context, right? Now you have to really understand, for me, that was needed because the word hijra had so much hate that I couldn't identify as a hijra. Now today I'm comfortable with saying that I'm a hijra, even though I'm not. I don't belong to the community. A lot of people on the street will say, look, hijra ja raha hai. But so I'm okay with that. I don't feel that, hey, I don't feel that bad. But there's so much stigma that at some point I needed to learn about trans women and LGBT people. Although we have a rich history of trans folk here, I still needed to go out, because it's so much stigma attached to it.
Okay. So thank you both. Sorry, I'm cutting you short because I don't want to cut anything of the conversation. Thank you so much for this conversation. I hope to have you back again because, I've learned a lot also. And,
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.